We have a new patch, so it's time for a new Byzantium strategy. The first thing I want to mention are Pronoia. They have been heavily nerfed. Not in the sense of how they work, but if you want to create a Pronoia, you can no longer appoint women or members of the clergy. This is because who you can appoint is now based off your succession law, and Byzantium starts with the Byzantine succession law, which bars women from inheriting, and of course members of the clergy. So neither can be appointed to Pronoia. This is a bit of a nerf, as it means we can no longer just appoint old women and clerics, who will usually die without any offspring, allowing us to inherit the land freely. I still think it's worth creating some Pronoia, but not expecting them to be inherited too quickly. I recommend releasing the historical subjects of Thessaly and Morea as Pronoia. We're not really looking to inherit them, it's more about getting rid of land that doesn't give us any benefits as Byzantium. I personally also like to feed Thessaly a lot of the land in the region where we have very low control, and even though we have control, we're not going to make much from it. I also like to give out the island, specifically this one, because otherwise Genoa will steal it. There is one thing of note though. Naples tends to attack us quite a lot in this current version, but it's not actually Naples, it's their vassal here who gains a insult rival CB on us. They then attack us and immediately call in their overlord Naples. By separating our border from them, we can stop them doing this. They don't seem to do this if we don't share a border. So that's one of the benefits of releasing Morea. But I actually think it's quite good to fight Naples. Naples, despite its size and strength, is very easy to fight because they only transport their army over to Greece piecemeal, allowing you to really easily just stack wipe them and then take all of their land in Greece and take a good 300 ducats from them. For now though, we're going to separate ourselves from them. Now, when it comes to legitimacy, there's going to be two events pretty early on. Each will take away 10 legitimacy. With that in mind, I don't think it's worth spending on legitimacy, at least until those events have happened, and I would recommend spending your legitimacy right at the start. I would recommend giving out the common militias privilege to the peasantry to increase the strength of our levies, and then I would recommend giving out the treasury rights privilege to the burghers. Treasury rights will decrease the bank interest, and we currently start with 2 loans, and the tax efficiency increase will just essentially provide us free money. In this patch, we now have a bunch of new buttons that we can press to gain things from the estates. I recommend kind of just pressing some of them. The appeal to the commoners for the 20 stability, I think you should press every single time. Do keep an eye on the happiness of the commoners though. If their happiness drops below 25, you won't be able to get levies from them. But for the other two, I want to mention specifically the request clerical endorsement, which gives you 15 legitimacy. I would hold off on doing this, at least until we're past those 2 events that I mentioned that are going to bring down our legitimacy. The other one I want to highlight is request emergency grants here, which lets us just take money from the burghers. One of our goals here is to conquer a lot of land quite rapidly, which will really balloon the size and wealth of the burghers. So when we press this button, we'll gain a few hundred ducats from them. So of course you don't want to press it now, but we're going to wait, and depending on how much money the burghers have, we'll then press it. There's one other button I want to highlight, and it's the Call Emergency Parliament. You see it loses us 10 legitimacy, but it doesn't require us to have 10 legitimacy. So even if we have 0 legitimacy, we can press this button. So one of the things we're going to do is start a war fairly quickly, then press this button essentially for free and get a parliamentary session. It's a little bit of a toss-up what our parliamentary session will be. We're going to hope for a balance the budget though. But as I said, it's a bit of a toss-up. Now for our economy, you'll see that we're immediately losing 200 ducats a month. You don't need to worry though, this is largely due to trade expenses and is going to be fixed by the AI within a few days of the start. I do recommend just getting rid of your navy though. Unfortunately, they don't provide us with much benefit and they give us a very large cost, so I would just disband them. When it comes to forts, I would demolish all of them outside of the one in Gallipoli and the one in Philadelphia. We're going to demolish both, but for the moment we're going to keep them. Of course, keep the one in Byzantium. We'll then stop paying for forts, we'll stop paying for army maintenance too. We'll also stop paying for diplomatic spending, and if we're still losing money, which we'll likely be, we're also going to stop paying for food. There's also a few buildings we can turn off, for example, the university in Constantinople, the few temples we have knocking around in our markets. Temples aren't really that useful in the current version as they no longer increase control, so there's no problem just turning them off. You could also turn off your sergeantary temporarily, but it does provide crown power, only local crown power though, making it not as useful. So you could also turn that off as well. For our rivals, we're going to set the Ottomans, Naples, and the Germiyanids. For our final one, I mean, it's kind of up to you. You could do Sicily, then get a destroy rival CB on them to take their land in southern Greece, or you could do another Beylik. So I'm just going to pick someone kind of randomly. For our cabinet ministers, we're going to set the good old helpful John VI, who clearly never did anything wrong. He has very good diplomacy stats, so we're going to immediately have him push communalism. We want to get our communalism as high as possible because it reduces the cost of revoking privileges, which will help with revoking the negative privileges we start with each of the estates. For our other cabinet slots, we're going to have one reduced war exhaustion. We start with fairly high war exhaustion, which reduces our import efficiency, our population growth, our army and navy morale, but probably most importantly, our production efficiency, which also negatively impacts our economy, which, as I'm sure you're aware, we barely have in the first place. For the last two seats, we'll have one increased stability and the other increased legitimacy. It's unlikely the legitimacy one's going to really do anything for a good while, so it might just be better to not increase legitimacy. Instead, try and make sure the estates are at their happiest, or do some recovery efforts to improve prosperity in some places. We're not going to appoint anyone to our cabinet. That costs too much money, and we can't even afford to here at the start, as we only have 4 ducats. So we're going to leave them empty for the moment until we do have some money. For research, we're not going to do anything crazy. We're just going to go for improved religious organization, universal Christianity, and then the guilds. And by the time we've done that, the Renaissance should have triggered. Before we unpause, there's one more thing we want to do. We want to tolerate Bulgarian culture. This will give us a lot more levies from our Bulgarian lands, and we kind of need to get any strength we can. You may want to have Andronicus III join an Order of Chivalry, but personally, I would hold off on doing this. There's a good chance he just dies within a few years of the game starting. So as I said, I'd recommend just holding off and not wasting your join Order of Chivalry action. For now, I think we're ready, so we're going to unpause. The first thing we're going to do is wait a month, then we're going to attack this Beylik network here. We should be able to, as long as the ruler of the Beylik doesn't die, annex pretty much the entire coast of Anatolia here in a single war without much antagonism. In previous patches, you could also embargo the Ottomans, and that would result in them destroying all of their forts. They don't seem to do this in the current patch. If you embargo them, it doesn't result in them demolishing the forts, so there isn't really much reason to do it. You can do it, but as I said, it's a bit of a waste of time. For now, I think we're ready, so we'll unpause. You can see after unpausing, our economy's immediately taken a boost. But as again, you can see it drops down at the start of a new month. We gain all the events related to the fate of the Phoenix. It used to be in previous patches that it was recommended that you could try and get money from the Papal State, but the amount of money they tend to give us now isn't very much, if they give us any at all. In my experience on the current version, they don't tend to give you the full 300. They might give you the 100 if you're lucky. And that's if they don't rival you, which they also tend to do, so I wouldn't really worry about it. We don't need it. The first thing I would spend the money you do get on is doing an export ban. I still don't recommend appointing anyone to your cabinet because there's lots of negative modifiers they could get that could easily just kill you if you have one of your cabinet ministers develop a negative trait. Now that the first month has passed, we can declare war, so we're going to declare on the Germiyanids. We're going to call in Trebizond. One of the reasons you might want to keep your navy is because they tend to try and block the strait with like one galley. In my experience, they don't tend to stick around though, so that's why I wasn't too bothered. We'll call up our levies. We'll also use the parliamentary action to call an emergency parliament. If you're lucky, you'll get to balance the budget. If you're unlucky, you won't. If you're really unlucky, like I am, you won't even get a noble debate. So instead, we're going to have to go with a cleric option and see if we can't do something to get enough support that we can change some laws. There's 2 laws we want to change, our administrative system and our distribution of power. The Pronoia system we use in the administrative system is costing us 10% max tax for every estate, so we obviously want to switch that out. And in the distribution of power, we start with favour the ruler, which is kind of deceptive in how good it is. The 33% crown power sounds very appealing, but I much prefer switching out to a favour law, so we can just get 10% extra tax from an estate without any fanfare. If you have to choose one and you're not able to do both, I would recommend getting rid of the Pronoia system primarily. It won't get rid of your existing Pronoias, they'll still be Pronoias, but it means you won't be able to create any more, which you probably don't intend to anyway. Now we'll just gather up the army for our invasion of Anatolia. The enemy should all swarm on your fort in Philadelphia, which should distract them a little bit. Here's the event for the rebellious Serbian vassal. As long as we can get his loyalty below 50% by 1371, he'll switch over and become our vassal. So we'll see about doing that. It's not too difficult. In order to win the war, we do need to occupy the capitals of each of the vassal nations. So we're going to make sure we do that. Here we can see Andronicus has just died, which is pretty unfortunate, but inevitable. It doesn't really change our overall strategy. As you siege down the locations belonging to these people, you may end up getting a bit of money from sacking certain noble buildings. So that's definitely a nice influx of funds if you do get it, like here, destroying the noble manor gives us 20 ducats. As you can see, most of them are on the fort here. We're going to just jump this little 2,000 here that we can stack wipe. It looks like they decided to fight us. That's fine. We'll just stack wipe all of them. Now we've taken all our goals. We have 100% war score, so we'll just demand all of our cores are returned to us. This is going to cost us 0 antagonism because we're just returning our rightful land, right? So we'll grab all of that. We could take even more, but I don't really see a need to. We can't full annex these guys, so there's not much point taking extra land. We'll demand they release our slaves and pay us war reparations, then we'll just take a bit of money and peace out. There, now our Byzantium's looking quite big. We'll also gain a new vassal, because this little guy here is a vassal of one of the nations we annex, so he switches over and becomes our vassal. He'll be a little disloyal, but nothing a little bit of support loyalist won't fix. We're now going to demolish all of the new forts we've gained. We gained one in Smyrna, which I suppose is the only one. Then we'll get rid of the one in Gallipoli, as earthquakes could destroy it anyway. And we'll get rid of the one in Philadelphia, as we don't really need it anymore. We also gained quite a bit of money, so we're just going to pay off our debts straight up. That'll increase our crown power a little bit and reduce the amount of money we have to pay in interest. I'd recommend now going around and turning off all your docks, if you haven't already done so, as well as things like wharfs. You can't really push maritime presence this early, and we don't have a navy that needs repairing or anything, so better just turn them off and save a bit of money. Also remember to check temples, as you'll likely have gained a few in the new lands. Turn those all off for now. Then I would head over and tolerate Turkish culture. This will put us close to our limit, but not at our limit. But it means we'll be able to call up even more levies, which is what we want. I still don't recommend you start spending on cost of court. At least for me, I haven't had the earthquake in Constantinople event, so there's not much reason for me to spend on the cost of court. So what we're going to do is bring down our minting to try and reduce our inflation as fast as possible. Inflation increases the cost of literally everything in the game. Well, not quite everything, but it increases the cost of court, it increases the maintenance for your armies, it increases your fort maintenance, it even increases your building maintenance for each of your buildings. So we definitely want to get inflation down as fast as possible. As I said, if you were lucky, you got the balance the budget option through the parliament and were able to bring it down a lot more, but I'm not you and I did not. I'm actually going to try and see if I can get enough support to pass or to change another law. Let's see how things go. Yes, looks like I'm barely able to gain the 50%. So we're going to switch out a law. We're going to switch out the favor the ruler, as I mentioned, to favor the wealthy. The nobles definitely have a lot more money than your burghers, but it's very hard to actually get any money out of them due to all the modifiers they have reducing their max tax. So I prefer favoring the wealthy, at least here, because it's much easier to get money from them, and we can get quite a bit of money from them. Burghers are friends after all. Remember to keep an eye on the request emergency grants. The moment this goes over 100, I'm going to grab it just to get some extra money. Now we're immediately going to transition to our next war. We're going to attack the Ottomans. The Ottomans are kind of deceptively weak. You'll look at them and say, oh, they only have 70,000 men, you have 20,000. But because of all the modifiers to our army, making it weaker, such as from war exhaustion and the corruption of the nobility, our army will probably lose to the Ottomans in a straight-up fight, so we're not actually going to fight them. Before you do this, make sure you do tolerate Turkish culture as well. But we'll declare war on them, we'll call in Trebizond, we'll raise the levies, and then we're going to try and avoid fighting the Ottomans as much as possible. If we're lucky, Trebizond will come over and fight them for us. And if our vassals are willing to play ball, they'll also come over and help out. Here's the bid for the Byzantine Crown. We've kind of been waiting for this. We're still waiting, at least for me, on the earthquake in Constantinople before we start increasing legitimacy. One of the options you now have during this disaster, though, is you can actually just accept the rebellion and invite the pretender to take the throne. Once rebelliousness reaches 80%, you can just invite him to take your throne. It will cost you 40 legitimacy. So if you plan to invite the pretender, which you may want to do, there's two potential leaders to the rebellion. There is the guy we have here, good old John VI, who did ridiculous amounts of damage to the Byzantine Empire over his lifetime. You can invite him to take the throne. He's quite good stat-wise, and he lives a very long life, normally dying in his 90s like he did in real life, making him quite a nice ruler. Of course, it means you'll lose the Palaiologos family if you do invite him, though. The other alternative leader of the rebellion is Demetrius. Demetrius is the leader of the rebellion. You can just accept him onto the throne. You won't lose the Palaiologos family, and everything will be cool and good, as it were. Demetrius is quite old, and so in my experience, sometimes he just dies during the succession crisis, which really just solves it for everyone. but John VI isn't really going to die because of the traits he has that make it so he lives a long time. As I said, he'll die in his 90s. I think since he's decided to show up, we're actually going to invite him to take the throne. We just need to wait for the rebelliousness of his faction to reach 80%, then we'll just accept that. With that in mind, I'm not going to spend on legitimacy since I'm going to lose basically all of it when we invite him to take the throne anyway, so we'll hold off in that regard. We've gotten the rebuilding of Smyrna event from taking it. Personally, I recommend going for the rebuilding the port instead of restoring the marketplaces. In my experience, the merchant quarters you get are too expensive to maintain and they don't provide enough income. So it's not really worth having them, as opposed to the shipyard, and we can just turn off the shipyard if it becomes too costly to maintain. Now, let's focus on our war with the Ottomans. As discussed, we're going to avoid fighting them. Aha, here's the earthquake in Constantinople. So if you do want to start pushing legitimacy, make sure you've had this earthquake and that original event I mentioned earlier before you start pushing up legitimacy. Since I plan to invite the Pretender to the throne, I'm not going to push up legitimacy, but if you plan to, this is kind of the point to start pushing legitimacy. For me, this little nation here was allied to the Ottomans, so we just walked over and beat them up. We'll have them pay us war reparations, give us some money, I guess release any slaves they have. Despite being actively stronger than us, they don't look stronger than us, so the Ottomans will hesitate to actually fight our army. They're taking the Turkish capital after a bit of sieging. The Turks actually decided to wander over into the Balkans and are now trapped there, so they can't get back. So we're going to use the opportunity to just blanket siege them. Ooh, it looks like we are being attacked by Naples. This can work to our favour, as I mentioned, because we'll use it as an opportunity to take their land. We'll peace out the Ottomans and full annex them just before they are about to attack us. Perfect. Next month we'll be able to accept the Pretender revolt and so end the succession crisis. Now they've taken a bunch of new territory. Do make sure to go back over and turn off any buildings like temples. You probably want to turn off the shipyard in Smyrna that you gained from an event as well. At this point, the burghers probably have quite a bit of income, so we're going to go slap them. They'll give us 200 ducats, just straight up. We're still working on getting our inflation down, so I'm fine running a deficit for a bit. Now, we gained this event from liberating this part of Anatolia. I definitely recommend going for the top option for the monthly legitimacy, even if you're letting the Pretender win like I am, because of course you'll still gain that legitimacy gain post-victory for the Pretender, which will make increasing legitimacy a lot easier. Speaking of letting the Pretender win, it's time. We're going to invite John VI to come and take the throne. It's going to cost us 40 legitimacy, but we have 0 and therefore will cost nothing. This will also immediately end the succession crisis, solving that issue. We'll also have him go and join the Hungarian chivalric order just to boost his mill skill a little bit. Here's another great event. This one gives us 20 legitimacy. If you're unlucky, you'll have got that event before you invite the Pretender to the throne, which would be sad, but luckily I've managed to escape from that. As mentioned, there goes the succession crisis. Because we invited the Pretender to take the throne, we actually have to choose one of 2 bad options or modifiers that will follow us for a few years. Personally, I prefer the second one. It just means the estates are going to be a little less happy, losing 5 estate satisfaction and also reducing parliamentary base support by 10% for 10 years. I don't consider either of those things a particularly big deal. We're now going to start strengthening our government, get our legitimacy up. Now let's go over and deal with the Neapolitans. As I've said, they're actually quite easy to deal with, simply because they don't bring their whole army over soon enough or in large enough quantities that they can actually fight us properly. And as you can see there, we've just had this nation flip over and join our side for a nice extra 5 legitimacy. Here's a nice event that can sometimes happen where you just get essentially some free money from somebody. Always nice to have events like that. I did forget to do it myself, so don't forget to do this. Now that we've decided to start increasing legitimacy, we're going to go to the clergy and ask for that little 50 next to legitimacy, which will put us up to 70 for me, which is quite good. Now we're just going to grab these Neapolitan army here. As I keep saying, they have a hard time really transporting their army over, so there's nothing really stopping us just cleanly wiping them. One thing that does happen sometimes is one of the Albanian nations will revolt and lead a large-scale revolt against Naples. If such a thing happens, they're kind of going to get in the way and occupy land that we want to take for ourselves. If it does happen, and it does tend to, I kind of just like to wait for them to finish their revolt before we make peace with Naples. That way we can take everything we want to take from them, instead of having to accept a lesser peace. Here's the beginning of the Renaissance. We're going to go admin as we pretty much always do. Here's our next parliament, or arguably our first one. I'm going to go for back the war effort because we can use it to essentially half our war exhaustion, which we are still trying to bring down. And we've done all the law changes we kind of want to do, so we're fine just passing this. Finally, the war with the rebels is over. We're actually quite close to forcing the Neapolitans to capitulate. So we'll see if we can't do that just by occupying the bit of land they have in southern Greece. We've already gained the max amount of war score we can get from beating them in battles, so hopefully a few occupations will give us what we need. It'd be really nice if we could get them to capitulate, because then we could take all of their territory in Greece, including the islands we can't really reach. And there we go, we've got a Neapolitan capitulation. Perfect. So we'll use this to grab all of the territory their vassals and they control in Greece. Unfortunately, we won't be able to take Albania as it's too expensive, so we'll just grab the Greek territory and then we'll take 300 ducats from them, ending that state of affairs. We've almost got our inflation down to 0, so that's solved. I would give out all of the land you just took from Naples over to vassals in the area. Morea is the one I would hand out all of the southern Greek territory to, while giving Epirus the land across the sea. You can probably start thinking about integrating Epirus at this point, and there's not really any reason not to, so I would begin their integration. Since we have a large bank, I'm going to rush up my legitimacy. I'd like to reach 100 legitimacy as soon as possible, and as I said, since I have a large bank, there's nothing really stopping me just absorbing the costs. We've managed to get our inflation to 0, so now we can start minting with no real problem. Once your legitimacy passes 95, you can start thinking about revoking the privileges. The one I like to prioritize is the consolidated corruption of the wealthy, not only because it reduces the max tax the wealthy can pay, but it also reduces your trade income and your export and import efficiency. It's tempting to want to go for the noble one because it's the most expensive, but the benefit from revoking it isn't actually that high. It mainly just strengthens your army from getting rid of the morale malice and increasing the size of your levies. I'd say the least valuable one is the corruption of the clergy, though you could leave this one around forever and probably not even notice. When you do want to revoke these privileges, though, there's a few things you should think about. You should think about your communalism level. Depending on how high it is, it will reduce the cost of revoking privileges. You should also consider waiting for a parliament and hoping that you get the parliamentary issue that reduces the cost of revoking privileges. But as I've said before, there are so many different parliamentary debates now. There are definitely a lot. So it's a lot less viable that you'll get the one you really want. But there is something you do want to do regardless of all that. You're going to want to make sure you spend on the books bureaucracy because that reduces the power of each of the estates. And you'll want to spend on honorary titles because that reduces your crown power. If you're going to revoke something from the nobles, you'll also want to spend on the themata because not spending on the themata bureaucracy increases the nobles' power. For now, we're not going to revoke anything from the nobles, so we'll leave that blank. Let me show you. The revoke cost for the consolidated corruption of the wealthy is currently 40 stability. If we wait for those bureaucracies to come online after I activated them, you can see the revoke cost has dropped down to 22, which is a lot less than 40. So we'll revoke this outright. The second one we really want to revoke is the consolidated corruption of the common people because it reduces our production efficiency. So we'll revoke that. Once that's done, we can stop spending on those bureaucracies. We only needed them for that slight moment. And would you look at that? We're making money. We're actually making 10 ducats a month from our burghers. And once we reach the max amount of legitimacy, which is right now, we're now making 25 ducats a month. Isn't it beautiful? We barely even did anything. And now we've solved all of our economic problems. As I mentioned, I'd recommend increasing your communalism value to reduce the cost of revoking the last 2 corruption privileges from the estates. With your power base really secured and having quite a lot of money roll in, you're really free to go anywhere. I would fight a war against Sicily to liberate the last of Greece, and then just dedicate my time to crushing the Turkish state so that we can end the fate of the Phoenix. We've gotten a little lucky in my run because the Turkish state that normally hangs out here that is very hard to destroy has actually gotten destroyed by the good old Ayyubids. So we only need to destroy these few Turkish nations, and then we'll end the rise of the Turks, and so end the fate of the Phoenix as well. With our victory, then we're freely able to form Rome, and enjoy all the benefits of doing so. For now though, I think I'm going to leave this video here. I think I've shown a simple enough way to get through the disasters, to get through the early game. I'm going to upload this save so that you can play from this position yourself, or if you want to look at this save and examine it, feel free to. I did make another minor video on how to utilize Pronoia so you can integrate them every time. If you're interested in just spamming Pronoia everywhere, I recommend watching that video. For now though, as I said, I think we'll leave the video here. Thank you for watching. I do hope this was helpful. I know we're only 9 years into the game, but I feel with this setup, we've basically solved all of our immediate problems and we're actually making money. So I won't bore you by showing me just conquering all of Anatolia. But to say it again, thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.